gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from the Flywheel and a little bit about newsletters with the help of our special guest, Zappi CMO, Nataly Kelly. Nataly, how are you?
Very well, Ian. How are you today?
I am thrilled to have you on the show. We're going to chat about Flywheels, one of your favorite topics. We're going to talk about your amazing LinkedIn newsletter and where the heck everyone should be doing newsletters and Substacks and all those different things. And of course, marketing, brand, content at Zappi. So first question, why the heck did you want to talk about Flywheels today?
Well, I think that so much of marketing and content is done in silos. And what I like about the Flywheel is connecting all the different stages. Whether you're thinking about a customer journey or you're thinking about how you build relationships with customers and where you have those opportunities to interact with customers, a Flywheel is a nice way of thinking about it, because so often we have thought of marketing as like a linear funnel, and we still use funnels for measuring and attribution and everything. But the Flywheel is really where kind of you turn the funnel on the side and then connect the top to the bottom. And, we often talk about, you've probably seen a Flywheel out there that's used by HubSpot, where I used to work for many years, where they're looking at the different stages of a customer journey and like attract, engage, delight. So historically, as marketers, we would think about top of funnel, attract, middle funnel, engage, and bottom of funnel is kind of delight the customer. Like, after you get them to be a customer, then you think about how do you turn them into advocates who continue to help build awareness, and you keep connecting that cycle. And the more you can do that, the more velocity you can drive in terms of revenue. So I love that whole model. And I've started to use something that's similar, my own little Flywheel. And to make this easier for investors and other executives to understand, I talk about brand, demand, land, and expand in a Flywheel format. So often we're asked as marketers to prove the value of brand investments, but I like to show that this is circular and they do feed each other, but it's not so linear. So don't expect, a specific ROI for that. It's going to feed into the demand area of your Flywheel, and that feeds into the land, closing kind of bottom of funnel motion. That feeds into the expand motion, where you're expanding the account, driving more revenue, but also hopefully turning them into advocates who will then continue to, be champions of your brand. So I believe a Flywheel is a good analogy for marketers to think about in many areas of marketing too, like a Flywheel within, like content marketing and, all those things. Like, how do we keep them engaged? How do we push them from our community back to our blog and push them from the community back to where they're going to advocate for us on social media? And, all of those things, like where are we connecting from which phase of the Flywheel to the next, to the next, to the next? How are we creating those motions more explicitly and intentionally?
I was thinking that as you're talking about Flywheels and how important they are, that the marketing, the buyer's journey as marketing relates to it, it's kind of like driving in England. It's like all these different roundabouts, right? Where someone's like getting on the roundabout and you want them to see your brand for a couple stops, and then they get off on the other, and then they go on their way, and then they hit another roundabout, and then they go around. And if you're doing it right, all those different pieces are connected. And we're gonna dig way into Flywheels later, but it's such an important sort of like business realization that lots of people have had. And I think that thinking of it from a marketing lens is like so important.
I agree. And I like the roundabout metaphor because it's interesting. It's like one of those like choose your own adventure, right? It's like you do have to get like somebody will get off here and somebody it's like an off ramp, but then they're headed to the next. And where do they get off on that one? And it is like creating a map, which is pretty fun as marketers that we get to do that and then plot all the content, all the touch points along each leg of the journey. It's a beautiful thing. It's tough, but we're building like our own marketing GPS.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And flash forward, well, not flash forward, but zooming out. Tell us your role as CMO at Zappi.
So I am the chief marketer at Zappi. I've been there headed toward 2 years now. Zappi is a consumer insights platform, and we have 350 plus of the world's largest global B2C brands. So companies like McDonald's, PepsiCo, Reckitt, Mars, a lot of these big giants in consumer packaged goods and quick service restaurants and industries like that that sell to mass consumers. And what our platform does is enables connected insights so that brands can see their advertising, their innovation, and their brand metrics all in one unified platform. So it's pretty fun if you're, someone who loves metrics and data and AI, because we were early pioneers of that before it became such a big trend. And it's great to see how the uptake is happening within our client base. It's fun to see how the work that they're doing in our platform actually drives decisions around what products they launch. Right now, a lot of people are, working on their Christmas ads and their Super Bowl ads for next year and stuff like that. So it's, actually the Christmas ads are pretty much locked at this stage. They were locked in July for the UK. Super Bowl
crazy.
Starting now. So yeah.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Which sort of speaks to like such a broad, oh man, how hard is our job that you got to have your creative locked by July for Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know what the hot thing is going to be, the hot goss.
Well, those brands have to make the hot thing happen. Like they have to come out with like the seasonal, Christmas tree shaped cookie or the, Hanukkah edition, they have to basically create all those seasonal innovations like way ahead because their supply chain requires them to manufacture things. And so they basically have to think a quarter or more ahead, sometimes a year ahead, depending on what type of product it is. So yeah, it's tough. Like, how do you know where the consumer's headed a year of where the consumer's decided where they're headed? So.
Yeah. Meredith, what the heck are flywheels?
So I think a lot of our audience will understand and know flywheel as a business metaphor, right? And it describes this incredibly efficient and effective way of attracting, engaging, delighting customers. But it's named after the physical flywheel. And the modern version of this was actually invented by a Scottish engineer named James Watt to power the steam engine. And fun fact, the word Watt comes from his name, like a 60-watt light bulb. And what it did was basically turn this up and down motion of the steam-powered piston into continuous rotational motion. So it delivered more consistent power by storing the energy during the piston's downward movement and releasing it on the upward movement. So it basically regulated and stabilized the amount of power going into the engine, so it maintained a consistent speed. And all of that is to say, like, this metaphor captures that sense of momentum that once the flywheel is spinning, it can build speed and go faster and faster. And the other idea is that when you reduce friction, the flywheel is able to go faster and faster then too. So the same is true of the flywheel in business, that the more you delight customers, the more successful you are, the more they'll refer others to you, and then those will refer more customers to you, right? So it starts to build momentum. And the less friction there is in the customer journey, the faster you'll get to that delight part. The part where they go, I'm really happy with this experience. I have to tell my friend or my coworker or my colleague about this. And the faster your customer base grows, the better your business does. So you basically want to make the customer experience really easy. And as that happens, your business will grow and grow and grow. The idea of the flywheel effect as a metaphor for business, though, was first introduced by Jim Collins in his 2001 book, Good to Great. His idea was that exceptional business results don't come from one big initiative or campaign. It's about these small cumulative successes over time. Jim Collins wrote in his book, "Good to great transformations never happened in one fell swoop. There was no single defining action, no grand program, no one killer innovation, no solitary lucky break, no wrenching revolution. Good to great comes about by a cumulative process, step by step, action by action, decision by decision, turn by turn of the flywheel that adds up to sustained and spectacular results." So all of that said, Nataly, I'm wondering if you can share an example you've experienced of the flywheel effect.
Yes, that's such a great description. I didn't know all the history myself, but I have read Jim Collins' books and love him as an author and love his ideas. So plenty of examples. I think one of the ones that will resonate with a lot of people is payment issues. So people often think, oh, where can I remove friction? Well, a general rule of thumb I've always used is the closer you get to someone's wallet, the more important it is to remove friction. Because as marketers, we often focus on top of funnel, classic funnel, methodology, thinking, oh, we're going to bring these in, we're going to convert. But when you get them all the way to the bottom, they're so close to buying. And then they have friction in the payment process or in pricing or in something that think of all the money you're wasting up top only to get them there. And then they are not going to have a good experience. They're not going to connect to the rest of the flywheel. I know I'm mixing metaphors here, but that's slowing your flywheel down. That's literally removing velocity. So I really believe that is often the most important area to focus. I'll give you an example. When I was at HubSpot, we realized that we were having trouble in certain markets, in certain countries, in certain languages with collections. And that was an issue that I looked at when I looked at the entire customer experience to figure out where could we make a difference and really help improve the customer experience. We noticed that with collections and payments and there were some issues. So when we looked at the billing communications with our finance team, who usually doesn't get much love from marketing, they're kind of self-serving in most companies. They don't realize that every touch point is a chance to delight a customer, whether it's an invoice or a bill or, a late payment notification. What's in your subject line and what's in that email actually really matters. And especially if they're struggling to meet their bills or they need a little bit of grace, that's often a time when you can prove that you're a good partner to your customers. So we looked at that and found that in some markets, people were complaining that the communications just weren't appropriate. They sounded very formal, very stiff, very almost legal-like. And that was not appropriate in some markets where you're literally, for example, in some countries in Asia, when you collect a payment physically, you don't hand the money to someone. You have to wrap it first in a tissue or something to hand it because it's not seen as appropriate to just Americans have a very transactional view of things oh, here's your money. Can I Venmo you? Yeah. We're very for other cultures, that's an important gesture and culturally has more significance. So even in our American-centric billing communications that was coming across, we're you owe us this. It was due by this date. You're behind. That's super rude in some cultures that are more formal and more nuanced in their communication styles, where it might be, "Dear kind sir or madam, we are writing to kindly remind you of the fact that blah, blah, blah." It's the wording really matters. And that's an example of how, changing those can really impact how much money you're actually going to be able to collect, that might be past due, or the speed at which you can collect it. Because if you're saying things in the wrong way and you're irritating your customer, they might be I don't like their tone here. I'm their customer. Why are they badgering me? So I'm going to put that on the last of my bills to pay this month. It actually really matters. So that's just one example of a zillion I can give of paying close attention to where is the friction and really trying to solve it. And as marketers, I feel part of the challenge is we don't often get as close to the bottom of funnel stuff as we should. Or call it the land and expand side of the flywheels. Okay, we often are so focused on, the brand and demand metrics. How do we get into the land and expand side where actually we can probably drive even more? It's easier to get more dollars out of the same customers you already have than it is to generate brand new ones. So where is that uplift in that part of the flywheel. There's probably a lot more there than we tend to think.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, so after Good to Great comes out, Jeff Bezos hires Jim Collins to teach his team about flywheels, and then creates the Amazon.com flywheel, which is like probably one of the most famous, versions of this. And so basically what they figured out was that there were pillars of the flywheel that would like never change. And it was like low prices, selection, and then fast shipping, which is sort of added later. And this idea that, so their flywheel is, and so flywheel, it's a bunch of things in a circle, right? And they lead to each other. So Amazon's flywheel was Amazon.com, lower prices, which increases customer visits to the website, which means more third-party sellers want to come to the website because there's that's where the customers are. Then now there's more sellers. Now the store is bigger, so there's more offerings, and then which grows revenue, right? And then it's back to lower prices on more offerings, right? So it's like this. The flywheel is, if you make the prices low, more people will come. If more people come, more suppliers come. More suppliers come means more stuff gets sold. More stuff gets sold is revenue, which means that they're going to take that revenue from all the stuff that they're selling and put it into lowering the prices even more. And so his famous quote was, your margin is my opportunity. And that's why, is because they were reinvesting the flywheel doesn't work if there isn't that final piece, which is the things have to connect, right? Like revenues growing in Amazon, what they did with that profit margin was they invested into the prices being lower on the site. So if they could decrease prices lower on the site, more and more people are going to come to the site. And that's how the flywheel spins, right? And so what most people, when they're trying to do this, don't actually connect the flywheel. Like they each have to flow into each other. Otherwise, exactly. Otherwise, it's a funnel, and it's not going to spin faster. So the reason why the flywheel, so like you take like a good example of like the thing that sits on like a river that has the paddles that spin. What is this called? A windmill, or a water wheel, whatever it's called.
Yes.
So, right. So here's the thing. So the water wheel, it spins. And the water comes down and it spins the wheel, right? But it doesn't spin it faster. The only way to spin it faster is to put more water through it, right? So what a lot of people do is they're creating a windmill or they're creating a water wheel where they're like, oh, well, if I keep putting, I put this, there's this stream, I'm going to put this thing there, I'm going to create all my energy that way, but it's never going to grow faster and faster and faster, aka it's never going to get exponential. The only way to make it exponential is to add more and more and more and more and more water into the thing, right? And so that's what makes it spin, and that's what makes Amazon grow so massively, is because adding more and more and more just added way more people, and then they added all these other things. And then free shipping was the thing that they just ate it, right? They just ate all the free shipping to say, okay, we're going to add this thing. Now everything's free, which kills their margin, but when they're doing so much volume, it doesn't matter. So anyways, all that to say, it's like, you got to make sure that your flywheel is connected. Otherwise, you just built like a windmill, and a windmill is not viral. A windmill has a limit because there's only so much wind. Like the wind, that's great. That's consistent. That's a good thing. But if that's what you have in your marketing, you need to go build a lot more windmills.
That's
you don't
right.
have flywheels.
Yeah. And I think the analogy for marketers is dollars. A lot of times marketers are looking at, oh, if I get more budget, I can do this much more in volume and demand. But I need more budget. I need more headcount. I need more of this. Often it's planned linearly. But what's nice about the flywheel is you're thinking, how can I speed it up by removing friction?
Yeah.
And that's what will create self-sustaining growth and self-sustaining velocity, which is very different from that water wheel example where it's like, okay, we add more in, it will go faster, but there's a limit to how much you can do that. And also it depends on continually adding more. And it doesn't have that self-sustaining, propelling momentum that you see with the flywheel, which is why it's so beautiful. And, we used to have at HubSpot, I remember Brian Halligan literally stand in front of a flywheel and spin it to remind us all, once you spin it and you get it in motion, it's just a matter of keeping it in motion and making it go faster. So you still do maybe have to add a little momentum here and there through additional budget, additional headcount, but you can also keep it going faster by literally removing friction, reducing, and I think that's really important because it's more light, it's light and air, is what you convey with the flywheel. And it implies that frictionless motion.
Yeah. And I think it's that the amount of doing, you don't have to do any more work, that the flywheel sustains itself. That is the key there, where you're I could step away from this and it's going to continue to grow. So the great example is sort of if you focused all your efforts on getting your customers to introduce you to 2 new deals a year, to 2 new customers, right? Your company would be unstoppable. Right? It's if they could help you close 2 new deals, your company would be unstoppable, right? But it's how many people are really going to go figure that out? It's it's too hard, right? And that's basically...
Or is it? That's the thing is obviously it depends on your, are you enterprise? Are you upmarket? Are you downmarket? 2 customers, if you have a volume play, might not be a lot, but if it's 6-figure deals, maybe that's going to really add velocity and momentum. I think the key thing is identifying what are the plays to reduce friction and increase velocity. And as you said, Meredith, when you're talking about speeding things up in the micro, the additive and cumulative effect of making everything 1% better, or, minimum viable progress is what I often use as a term to think about this, is what are the small things we can do to create uplift today and momentum today that don't require tons and tons of thought and planning and strategy. If we do that one little tweak, that's going to make it a little better. And the next day, another little tweak. And the next week, another little tweak. And those things add up. So I really do believe that what Jim Collins says is accurate there. And I believe that's how you remove friction from a flywheel and add velocity, is through those little micro decisions.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is really interesting about, the Amazon flywheel is that, and to your point earlier, that the whole thing about a flywheel is that it's so hard to get started. So because once you spin, the first time you spin it, in Price is Right, the big wheel, and you see the little old lady or little old man, and they got to go spin the giant wheel. And it's you're I'm worried for their safety, right? Because they got to reach up high and they got to pull, and they got to put so much effort into pulling that wheel. But as soon as it's all the way down, then it starts spinning, right? So that's the same thing with the flywheel. And what that pulling, what the hard part of pulling that down is building the actual flywheel that you feel really confident that each of the spokes in this wheel are actually things that are true and real and are going to keep, being the same over time. So for Bezos, it's he's I know that low prices is going to be important forever. I know that increased selection is going to be important forever. And then, fast shipping is going to be important forever. So it's I'm going to invest in those 3 things literally at all costs, at all of their profits, invest in those 3 things. Because if they're the best at those 3 things, then they're going to be better than everyone else. And then he was able to sort of add on additional pillars that were synergistic.
Yes.
Right. So, but those 3, just those 3, they know that's the hard part, is starting the spin. You have to build it strategically for the long-term, haul. And so back to the question of if every new customer in a year can get you 2 new customers, you're going to be invincible because it compounds over time and it's going to go absolutely crazy. But But if you're like, oh, but we're only going to keep 25% of our customers, you know what I mean? It's like, then all these other things sort of like start to come into place. So then you say, okay, well, that can't be our pillar because we can't realistically assume that our customers will always be able to find us new customers and that those customers will stay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to find the pillars that you know that you can deliver on and that you know are valuable to your customers and will be valuable for years and years and years.
Right. Well, that's the key thing that I think is a struggle for many marketers and many business leaders in general is, can you stick to the strategy? Like first, can you identify the right strategy? But then are you going to be able to stick to it when times get tough? Or are you going to realize you need to pivot? You know, depending on the stage of evolution that your company's at, you know, some companies, especially startups, they begin with a clear strategy, but once they find out what the market demand is, especially if they're building a product like a software product, they have to pivot pretty quickly, adapt their offering to match where the niche is in the market that they can serve. And it also can depend even on your funding model. You know, like how long can we go without a profit? You know, how long can we pour those investments back in? You know, do we need to be viable and profitable within the first year to stay afloat? Or are we going to take outside investment? There's all those considerations, but I think the key thing is knowing the time horizon that you're working with, because I feel like as marketers, we often get pressure to deliver in a time horizon that is unrealistic, and people want to see immediate ROI, you know, and some of these plays really do take a long time, especially content plays. You know, we're not going to, in many cases, be able to show full flywheel attribution from something that's brand new and is a brand new play. I will tell you, last year, exactly a year ago, actually in September, Zappi launched a book. And this was a big content play for us. You know, we wrote it with the chief insights officer of PepsiCo and our founder, our original founder, Steve Phillips, and who's currently our chief innovation officer. And that is a content marketing play. We had a message we wanted to get out there in a format that was very specific to show credibility to the market and more robust thinking around the problem that we're trying to solve. But the delivery, you know, format was a book. And that flywheel surprised me hugely because we launched the book in September. We did a billboard on Times Square. We did a party in New York, and we, you know, talked about it on social media. Most marketers would call this a brand play, a thought leadership play, an awareness play. And within a couple of days, we had a major alcohol manufacturer, one of the largest in the world, somebody who's in our target sweet spot ICP, came in as a hand raiser on our website saying, I read the book, I got the Kindle edition, I'd like to see a demo of your product. And I was like, wow, now that is fast velocity. I've never seen, like, we didn't nurture them. We didn't do anything. They literally read our book, were convinced, wanted to talk to us, you know, immediately came in, you know, that way. And I thought, wow, now that's rapid velocity from the brand into the demand side of the funnel, you know, and then they continue. But like now, how do we land and then expand that account over time and bring that back to the brand value and make them a happy customer? But it's interesting because a content play like that could take many years to see real results, or it could be within a couple of days of launching it. Like you don't know as a marketer often, you know, you have estimates and you have hopes and you think you can make an impact with certain plays. For that one, we had brand awareness metrics that we were trying to move and, you know, some of that, but we didn't expect that we would see MQLs, like, you know, request a demo from like launching a book. Like that didn't enter our mind, but it's directly attributable to that. So it's an example of a content play that can be like a feeder for a flywheel motion that is kind of unexpected. But what I like to pay attention to is when you see that velocity, pay attention to it, because it probably means there's more there. And I did double down on Amazon ads, and I, you know, tried to get that book in front of more people who have similar profiles, and tried to like have my BDR team send copies to the right people, you know, direct to the people who might, you know, who might be similarly looking for a solution like ours. So I think you just never know where you're going to find those little magic spots of flywheel velocity that surprise you.
Yeah, I have this thing that I call aqueduct marketing, which I should probably actually publish a post on this. But basically the idea is that, like, if you're, let's say, your product is a castle, you're trying to build a moat, you got to dig the moat and then you got to fill this thing with water, right? Well, how are you going to fill this thing with water? You're going to dig down, whatever, you're going to dig this big thing and you got to go figure out how to get water. Well, the best way to fill it is to go find the natural springs in the mountain and just tap into the spring and start building aqueducts, so that every time you build an aqueduct once, it starts filling your moat. And then all of a sudden now all of these different things are fueling your, now, each time you build one, you don't have to do it again. Right. And I think that's sort of like how I think about content is like, are you going to create something that's so good that you do it and that this thing has so much value that it will continue to perform, over time, but you have to like really create something special. And I think that just so many people like don't want to like walk up the mountain and find the spring and like build the aqueduct because it's too much work to go do that. So it's like, I'm just going to do something that's like really low calorie. That's like not that. And it's like, you end up just carrying buckets of water over and over and over again and trying to, dump them in your moat. And that doesn't work. Like that's not like a sustainable strategy.
That's so true. And I think often your equivalent of like a spring detector, call it like a metal detector, but for finding that well spring, it's often your brand values that are the compass that will point you to where those exist. So a lot of the gems are in the company's seeds of their history. Like, why were they founded? Like, what are their true values? Not just what do they say are their values, but what do they actually value? And also, how do their customers see them? What do the customers see about them that's unique? I mentioned, early stage companies often have that finding their niche, finding their product. Often they don't know what's unique about them until they start getting out there and connecting with customers. Then they find their sweet spot, they find their niche. Once you've found that, though, some companies just continue to approach that same niche, but don't go back often enough to find out, like, what do you think is different about us? What do you like about us? What do you not like about us? To know as a marketer, I better stay away from talking about that stuff. I've done that little exercise with many companies that I've advised over the years. They're always surprised. Like some founders are like, oh, we're known for our customer service. That's what really differentiates us. Then I survey their customers. Actually, they think they have the cheapest price. That's why they like them. It's not because of their customer service. Maybe the owner and the founder prided themselves on that, but it doesn't mean that's what the customers actually think. And so knowing what your customers think and how they perceive your brand is the compass, because that will orient you more to create those high value content offers and things that really, really are aligning and make that flywheel spin faster. It's really aligning your brand plays with everything else you do. And I think for content marketers in particular, that's so important because your brand values should show up in your voice and every piece of messaging, every piece of copy that you write, whether it's a knowledge-based article, whether it's a script for somebody to use when they talk on the phone, like an onboarding guide, it could be anything. Your in-app notifications, it could be anything, but your brand voice is really how you decide to communicate with your customer. And that is not just what we typically consider marketing communications. It touches every part of the customer experience. So for me, that's all part of that customer journey, AKA Flywheel.
Yeah, I think that like if one of the pieces of your flywheel is like create original ideas, that's probably a good thing to put there. If the piece of the flywheel is like create white papers or podcasts or like if it's like, you know what I mean? Like that's not a good thing to put there. Like it's like, and those are ways in which you can deliver those original ideas, right? And actually let's talk newsletters. You have a wonderful newsletter on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that's on LinkedIn that I'm trying to make wonderful every week. Making Global Work is your newsletter. So I'm just curious, like, why are you building on LinkedIn? Have you thought about Substack? What are you thinking about Substack? What are you thinking about building newsletters and just delivering ideas to people right now?
Well, interestingly, the reason that I chose LinkedIn versus a typical email newsletter or Substack or all the other options available to us as marketers is velocity, both in terms of it's velocity and scale. So, and it's also reducing friction in getting to the content. So there's a trade-off, of course. You don't get great analytics. You don't have all the detail, who's clicking on what. You don't know everything. You don't know how long they read. There's a lot of metrics that you don't get that are, really specific to your audience on LinkedIn newsletters. But what I like is, okay, it's a business audience. I have a decent following, a lot of connections. I want to reach them. Do I really want to ask them to sign up for something and have to give me their email when I know their inbox is crowded? What if I just try to reach them when they're logged into LinkedIn, which a lot of people are pretty regularly, and it hits their inbox, and they get a notification, and they see it in their feed? It's a triple play. So for efficiency, I can reach them 3 ways with one publish button, and I don't have to do that many steps. And what I like about it is simplicity. Well, sometimes I would wish for better formatting. I like that it's simple because it keeps it quick. It doesn't take long to format it. It doesn't take long to edit it. I can get it out, and it's easy to edit. If I make a mistake, I can go back and fix a typo, which my readers often will point out. As soon as I have a typo, I know I have a lot of, people who are writers and word nerds and translators and such. They will immediately point out my typos to me, which I'm grateful for. Thank you to anyone who has done that. But it also proves I'm not writing it with AI when I have a typo. So I kind of feel like the authenticity is there. Anyway, so velocity in reaching people and removing friction for the reader is important to me. And I feel like, if they're mostly on LinkedIn already, and that's where they like to get their business type thinking about their career, and that's what I'm writing about, that's probably a natural place for me to reach them. And they can get a human connection instantly to a person versus having to go to a website, click on a thing. It's like reducing friction for them and reducing friction for me, the person creating it. So I actually love LinkedIn newsletters. At Zappi, we've launched quite a few. We're testing, but we've seen massive growth with all of them. They all have a slightly different focus. And it's interesting. One thing I wanted to see was overlap between followers and connections and subscribers. And what I'm noticing is I have a lot of people who are subscribers who are not connections. Some might be followers, some might not, but they like the newsletter. And I like having that diversity of segmentation built in. And yeah, I'm trading off some analytics, but I kind of feel like that's the way things are headed anyway. It's like, if they want to contact me to work with me in some way, they know how to reach out. They're right there on LinkedIn. Yep. All they have to do is send me an email or send me a message. It reduces friction. I'm putting less barriers in the way for them to convert if they want to convert and talk to me about some business opportunity or, something. They can. I've got the CTAs right there on my profile. It's basically my own little flywheel, and I like it. I think it's efficient. Is it perfect for every type of business? No. Is it good for a business where you've got really tight relationships with your customers and B2B? Probably well suited to that. I'm not sure about B2C. I wouldn't probably use it for that because B2B, social network, business, business networking. But I think it's great for certain business types and it's great for certain marketing strategies. And I'm using it, both personally for my personal brand and for Zappi as a strategy. And we're seeing great results so far. We actually see some of the brands that we feature responding and reaching out to us, and it's pretty cool to see that. Like, we're authentically sharing data from testing the products and ads from those brands in our newsletters. And then when they see it, because we tag them and we tag their company, we give them a shout out, and sometimes they engage and they share it around, and it helps create, we do that for current customers, prospects, campaigns we admire. It's always authentic. We don't feature brands that we don't think are doing a good job. And also they don't score well with consumers. Like, they have to actually get good scores for us to feature them. So, it's authentic, and it's not just our opinion, it's consumers' opinions. I feel like the data is valuable. We're giving value and they like it, and, others learn from it. So I feel like it is unique and authentic and helpful to the world. So
I love that.
mm-hmm.
Nataly, it's been wonderful having you on the show. Thanks so much for talking Flywheels, content marketing, and all that. Final question here. What's your best advice for a CMO who's trying to figure out their brand content strategy and how it fits into a marketing strategy?
Content strategy. Ask your customer. Ask your customer. And if you can't ask your customer directly, ask the people at your company closest to the customer. What do you find helpful? What are your problems? How can we help you? Knowing their challenges and really having empathy for the customer is the number one thing that will guide you in your content strategy forever and ever.
Fantastic. Nataly, thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks both.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.